This passage is adapted from Richard, Florida. Bigger isn't necessarily better when it comes to city size. A pair of recent studies suggest that although industrialized nations may have benefited from larger cities, the same is not true for the rapidly urbanizing areas of the developing world. In these parts of the globe, there really might be such a thing as too much urbanization too quickly. The studies by Suzanne A. Frick and Andres Rodriguez Bose of the London School of Economics take a closer look at the actual connection between city size and nationwide economic performance. The initial study from last year examines the relationship between economic development as measured by GDP per capita and average metropolitan area size in 114 countries across the world between 1960 and 2010. To ensure robustness, it controls for variables including national population size, physical land area, education levels, economic openness, and other factors. The size of cities or metro areas across the world has exploded over the past century, with cities in the developing world growing much faster and much larger than those in more developed nations. Between 1960 and 2010, the median city in high-income countries grew modestly from 500 to 650,000 people, but the median city in the developing world nearly quadrupled, expanding from 220,000 to 845,000 people. In 1960, 12 of the top 20 countries with the largest average city size were high-income countries. By 2010, 14 of the top 20 were in the developing world. Urbanization has historically been thought of as a necessary feature of economic development and growth, but this study finds the connection is not so simple. While advanced nations benefit from having larger cities, developing nations do not. Advanced nations experience a 0.7% increase in economic growth for every additional 100,000 in average population among its large cities over a 5-year period. But for developing nations, the addition of 100,000 people in large cities is associated with a 2.3% decrease in economic growth over a 5-year period. In their latest study, the researchers found that developing nations tend to get a bigger bang for their buck from smaller and medium-sized cities. These countries see the most economic benefit from having a larger proportion of their urban population living in cities of 500,000 people or less, because cities tend to have a more positive economic impact in larger countries. Having a metro with more than 10 million inhabitants produces a nationwide economic benefit only if the total urban population is 28.5 million or more, according to the study. This makes sense. Bigger, more developed countries are more likely to play host to knowledge-based industries that require urban agglomeration economies. There are several reasons why megacities often fail to spur significant growth in the rapidly urbanizing world. One, the lion's share of the places that are urbanizing most rapidly are in the poorest and least developed parts of the world, whereas the places that urbanized a century or so ago were in the richest and most developed. This history has created a false expectation that urbanization is always associated with prosperity. Additionally, globalization has severed the historical connection between cities, local agriculture, and local industry that powered the more balanced urban economic development of the past. In today's globally interconnected economy, the raw material that flowed from the surrounding countryside to the city can all be inexpensively imported from other parts of the world. The result is that the connection between large cities and growth has now become much more tenuous, producing a troubling new pattern of urbanization without growth. The main purpose of the passage is to describe the causes and consequences of a phenomenon, propose a new solution to an ongoing problem, question whether recent research has practical applications, critique the methodology used to arrive at new findings. So this is A, right? The author is interested in studying the phenomenon of urbanization without growth that has happened in the developing world. So the author is looking at the causes and consequences of that phenomenon, not proposing a new solution, not questioning the applications of the research, or critiquing the methodology. Which choice best supports the idea that a country's unique circumstances are likely to distort comparisons between its economic growth and urban population size and those of other countries? Okay, 1 to 4, 14 to 16. 1 to 4, 14 to 16, 32 to 35, 32 to 35, and 44 to 45. Okay, so we are looking at evidence for a country's unique circumstances are likely to distort comparisons between its economic growth and urban population size with those of other countries. Okay. A pair of recent studies suggest that although industrialized nations may have benefited from larger cities, the same is not true for rapidly urbanizing areas of the developing world. To ensure robustness, it controls for variables including national population size, physical land area, education levels, and so on. Advanced nations experience a 0.7% increase in economic growth, and bigger cities tend to have a more positive economic impact in larger countries. So I think it's B, right? Because in B, we are very clearly told that the researchers, they controlled for variables which were very specific to a country, right? The other options are making more generic claims. So yeah, B would be the right answer here. Based on the passage, which choice best describes the relationship between Frigg and Rodriguez' first and second studies? Okay, so the first study was this one. The initial study from last year examines the relationship between economic development and average metropolitan area size. And in their latest study, they found that developing nations tend to get a bigger bang for their buck from smaller and medium-sized cities. So I think it's a follow-up study for the first study, because in the first, they showed that really large metropolitan areas don't tend to benefit developing nations as much as they benefit developed nations. And then they followed that up with a study of smaller and medium-sized cities. The second study corrects a minor error in the research of the first study. The second study confirms a hypothesis that they were unable to confirm in the first study. The second study builds on the first study's findings. The second study offers a more negative interpretation of a recent event than the first study does. So it's C, right? It builds on the first study's findings because, as we said, it's a follow-up study to what factors or what variables might be responsible for this poor correlation between urban size and growth in less developed countries. As used in line 29, feature most nearly means 29. Urbanization has historically been thought of as a necessary feature of economic development and growth, as a necessary component, right? As a necessary part. Urbanization has been thought of as a necessary part of economic growth. Specialty, peculiarity, which is basically something particular or eccentric, and innovation. None of them fit the context. It can most reasonably be inferred from the passage that a megacity's economic impact on a country is greater in countries with larger physical land areas, dependent on the types of companies located in the megacity, relatively equal for developing countries and high-income countries, neutralized by the economic cost of maintaining a megacity. So I think it's B, right? Because there was this element here which said that bigger, more developed countries are more likely to play host to knowledge-based industries that require urban agglomeration economies, right? So if you need an urban agglomeration because you have a knowledge-based economy, then you are likely to see that that benefits you more as a country, right? So I think line 49 to 51 is where we have evidence for that. Is that an option? 48 to 51, right? So this should be the answer for 16, and this will be for B. The main purpose of the sixth paragraph, lines 52 to 60. 52 to 60, this one. There are several reasons why megacities often fail to spur economic growth in the urbanizing world. For one, the lion's share of the places are in the poorest and least developed parts of the world. So I think this is giving you one reason why this correlation doesn't exist for the less developed world. Provide an overview of existing megacities in high-income and developing countries. Develop a claim about the effect of large cities in various parts of the world. Identify a widely accepted theory about city size that future research should be able to confirm. Compare causes of urbanization in the past with those in the present. So I'm leaning towards D, but I want to look at the paragraph again. It's definitely not A. There is no overview of existing megacities in big and developing countries, and not C either. Just wanted to compare. Is there a sense of comparison? Yeah, it does, right? This history of urbanization in the developed world has created a false expectation that urbanization is associated with prosperity, right? So, causes of urbanization. I don't think he's talking about causes. Let me read again. For one, the lion's share of the places that are urbanizing are in the poorest, right? So this is not causes of urbanization. Then what is B saying? Yeah, I would go with B. It is developing a claim about the effect of large cities in various parts of the world, urban, as in high income versus low income. The effect of large cities. Yeah, I think it's B. Yeah. As used in line 69, producing most nearly means 69. The result is that the connection between large cities and growth has now become much more tenuous, producing a troubling new pattern of urbanization without growth. So, creating, right? It's creating a new pattern. That's the best replacement for the word. Creating a pattern of urbanization without growth, not supplying, not directing, not containing. According to the graph, during what range of years did the median city population size in developing countries initially surpass that of high-income countries? Okay, so this is the graph that we are looking at. This is high income and this is developing countries, median city population size. During what range of years, right? So it surpassed it here, which is between 1990 and 1995. 1990 and 1995. Which claim from the passage is best supported by the graph? The median population of cities in developing countries grew more sharply from 1960 to 2010 than those of cities in the high income countries. That was said, right? That was said in the passage that if you look at this part, the median city in high income countries, they grew modestly, but in the developing world, they quadrupled. And this is exactly what is happening. The growth is modest for high income, but extremely high for the low income world. So it does look like A. So I'm going to go with A. In 1960, more than half of the countries with the largest average size city were high income countries. More than half of the countries with the largest. Yeah, that's also true. High income. But that's not supported in the graph, right? Because it only shows, yeah, in 1960, it shows the number of, so it doesn't really talk about the country. So even though B is true, it's not supported by the graph. Addition of 100,000 people in a large city causes an increase in economic growth, but causes a decrease in economic growth. This is also true, but not supported by the graph. Developing countries benefit from having more of the population living in smaller and medium. So this is also true, but not supported by the graph.